This podcast provides a platform for our guests to express their own personal views and opinions. Some or all of these views and opinions may not be shared by Ben and/or Yoel.
Welcome to the Too Dad to Quit podcast,
the podcast where we highlight stories of dads on the other side of divorce
to inspire and give strength to dads going through it.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Yoel.
We are up to our 5th episode. We're really excited about it, and I'll get to it in a second. But I did want to remind you all, make sure that you do subscribe, like, share, and reach out to us if you want to tell your story. We do want to have you here. We want to have as many guests as possible. We want to tell your story, let you tell your story. And everyone, even if you don't think your story is important, everyone has something to share and something to give over. And we really want to have you on it. This episode is with Noah Joseph. He is a car fanatic. He has 2 young children. He started in a small town in Canada and made his way thousands of miles away, built a life in a new country. He's very calming, I would say, his demeanor. And it was very interesting listening to him and how he's thought through everything that he's done, especially the way that he and his ex are parenting. It's very, very well thought out, and it's something that's very special. And to hear him talk about it is really, really nice. And what did you take from this episode? And it was, I got a lot from it, but I'd love to hear what you got.
Yeah, I got a ton from it. I also have to throw out there that he's a fellow Canadian, so that was exciting. I think this is the first podcast where we actually shared a drink together, Noah and I. Ben, we'll get you in on that next time, maybe eventually.
We'll see. I'll enjoy my water.
But that definitely helped with the calming demeanor. But yeah, Noah, I know Noah for a while, and he's just a pleasure. And something that I really took from it was the way he spoke about making a decision, being intentional. He made a decision that he's not going to be angry. So he was quite candid about having feelings and emotions and having a choice to make. He can either go in the direction of being angry and resentful, and that could affect his communications with his ex-wife, and that obviously then trickles down into how it affects his children. Or he can go the other way and make a decision to let go of that.
Right. And intentional is a great word for that, because he said, I only had 2 emotions, and I never knew how to feel the thing before the reaction, which is anger. And he decided that he needed to figure it out and get over it, or he would be stuck in a horrible loop. And intentional is a really good word.
Yeah, and not only that, he was also, like many of our other guests, he talked about the fact that he has gone to a therapist. And that's important. I think it's important for men to understand that there's no stigma attached to that, especially these days. There probably should never have been a stigma, and certainly not these days. And men need that. They need somebody to talk to, whether it's a good friend or a therapist or both. So he was very candid about that, and he was very open about how that's helped him as well. So I think there's just so many takeaways. And like you, Ben, I really, really enjoyed the discussion we had.
Yeah, and as a car guy, I really, really enjoyed this episode. And enjoy.
Welcome, Noah. So good to have you on the podcast. Appreciate you doing this.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, great.
Wish I didn't have any experience to impart, but if I do, then glad to share it.
Yeah, it's going to be good. I'm super excited about this. I know Ben is as well. I'm just going to tell our listeners, our audience, a bit about you. Noah Joseph is a Canadian Israeli who writes about cars for a living. He's a divorced father of 2 and is blessed with a twisted sense of humor, an unreasonable love for racing stripes, and a deep-seated phobia of roller skates. Is that true?
Not even.
Okay. He has a bachelor's degree that's almost worth the paper it's printed on, clearly has a sense of humor, that's me ad-libbing, and a face for radio. So no one tell him the cameras are rolling, and if anybody would see how many cameras we have rolling, try not to tell you, Noah, what's going on behind the scenes. In any
all these newfangled gadgets facing me over
Cheers here. Before we get started.
L'chaim.
All right, bro. Cheers. Yeah, being a fellow Canadian, except I'm from the better part of Canada, Toronto. Noah's a Montrealer. What part of Montreal is it still? Yeah, before the referendum or after the referendum. What part of Montreal are you from, by the way?
I'm from a town called Montreal West. Has about 7,000 to 10,000 people. It's like right next to the Jewish neighborhoods, but like not.
Is that
not
the fancier version or the not fancy version?
It's not so fancy, but it's waspy.
Was it newer? Like the newer version? Like
No,
sometimes they create new
much older.
neighborhoods.
You're from New Jersey.
And the new neighborhood is like Brooklyn East, and it's this
Right.
same Brooklyn but to the east, but a little newer.
Right, so this was Montreal West, which was actually like built like before all the other towns built up around it. So it was like farmland and these now very old houses. And the neighborhood's like 100 years old plus. I remember when they celebrated their centenary. All the houses that were there when the town was formed actually got like a special plaque, and we missed it by like 2 years.
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
Is it closer to Côte St. Luc?
Right next to Côte St.
Outremont?
Luc.
Oh, okay.
Right next to Côte St. Luc. So I walked to Shul in Côte St. Luc.
Synagogue. Got it. Okay. And Côte St. Luc is close to Outremont? I'm asking.
No.
That's where my mom grew up. So I'm just
Oh, yeah, no, Outremont is like another part of town.
got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was a nice place to grow up. It was interesting being like one of the only Jewish kids in the neighborhood. But I went to Jewish school, so I had like Jewish friends from school who just like didn't so much live in my neighborhood. So
You have siblings?
I have one older brother who kind of doubles as a sister sometimes.
Okay. All right. Were you guys close?
Should we ask to explain that one? I don't know. After the opening joke,
I
I'm kind of hesitant. I was going to tell my story, but now I'm like, forget it. This is getting more interesting by the minute.
Were we close? Yeah, we were very close growing up. We did everything the same until like our paths just like diverged. He became a hipster and I became religious, and he moved to the States and I moved to Israel, and yeah.
When did you move to Israel?
It's been 19 years now. Yeah, I moved right out of
You're
college.
kidding? 19 years?
19 years.
Holy moly.
Yeah, 2004. I almost said 2023.
What was the catalyst for that?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. Couldn't get good hummus in Montreal. I don't like hummus that much. I had actually been flying back and forth a lot when I was in college. I was like involved in a prominent Israel advocacy campaign at Concordia University when it was like, the shit was really hitting the fan. If I can curse on your show.
Yes, you can. It's not for kids. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's about kids.
It's about kids, but not for well, it is for kids, but.
Yeah, I kind of felt like I needed to settle down somewhere, and Israel was starting to feel more like my home than Montreal, and Montreal started feeling more like my past, and Israel more like my future. So yeah, right out of college.
My favorite pair of gloves I bought there.
Nice.
They're wool on the outside, but like super soft and like thinsulate on the inside. So they're like faux wool
Pretty sweet.
things.
Sweet.
So
Yeah, Canadians do good gloves.
that's
That's
for
what
sure.
we're good for.
So you were politically active. Like, do you enjoy politics? Is that something that you're still into? Or?
No, not really. Like I moved here, I was like a political activist for a while. I worked in some think tanks on some political campaigns, and pretty soon figured out what everybody told me I would, that politics is a dirty game here, and you don't want to be involved in it. And even if you're not like in national politics, then or municipal politics for that matter, I guess. But like working for think tanks and nonprofits and that kind of thing, a lot of people move here with that sort of goal in mind and that career path. So you end up with a lot of people vying for few jobs that are thankless and don't pay very well.
And you were a writer? Were you a writer back then?
No, it's not something that I had done professionally before, but I started getting into it. I started blogging about cars when that was like still a new thing. There were basically like 2 websites for car news. Actually, my brother turned me onto it because he was like, you read a lot of like car news, like where are you getting your news? I said, well, I get magazines when I can get my hands on them.
Right.
But by then, the news is already months old. He's like, well, why don't you check out autoblog.com or Jalopnik? Jalopnik.
That's great.
So for a while, it was Autoblog and Jalopnik were basically the only 2 sites out there, and I worked for Autoblog. Started when it was like at its infancy, and I kind of grew up with it. writing about cars professionally. And from there, I branched out with other clients. Had a couple of pieces published in the New York Times, Car and
Wow.
Driver.
Wow.
So yeah, it was interesting. It was
Is it all cars?
all types of cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you covered everything.
I covered whatever the industry had to throw at us, and all the automotive news that was fit to print was our approach to things.
One sec, we're not done with cars. We're gonna get back to that in a
Back to
second.
cars? Okay.
But I'm just curious because this just came up in conversation with somebody.
Uh-huh.
What? And this is funny because I'm told a lot that I think too much.
Uh-huh.
But ironically, I'm about to
Who
ask
tells
you.
me that?
Well, and that's what that because you were to think. What is a think tank? Can you explain to our audience, or really to me, but to our, what is a think tank? Was I talking to you about? I was talking to
Not
somebody
me.
about.
No.
Yeah, what the hell is
I
a
don't
think
know
tank?
where the term came from, but basically it's like a research institute, but like not like a laboratory. They're coming up with ideas and positing policy and like that. So political research institutes that were coming up with policy recommendations came to be known as think tanks.
Uh-huh. And so, how does it? They get grants, or they're nonprofit, or how does it work? Like financially, like what's the
Yeah.
model there? I'm just curious. Do you know?
I
Is
think
it-
they would get funding from various sources. I worked at one just around the corner here, and
here in Jerusalem?
here in Jerusalem.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
Thank
there's definitely different models,
Yeah.
but also, some politicians will go to think tanks and ask them to research something, or
Right.
they're like brains on demand.
Yeah.
Brains on demand. I like that. All right.
And apparently, especially in the States now, there's a lot of policy that ends up, a lot of legislation that's basically written by these think tanks, and it gets proposed to, some lawmaker who adopts it, sponsors it, gets other people on board. And so, you need the legislators to actually sponsor it and to
Right.
support it and to vote on it. But a lot of the heavy work is being done by third parties.
Cool. All right. Now that we got that out of the way, back to the cool stuff.
So I see you've got a Ferrari behind you.
Yes.
I
That is
actually,
a,
growing up, one of my neighbors actually had that car, but it wasn't a real Ferrari. It was like a kit they built on top of an old Corvette or
funny.
something.
Yeah, I've seen some of those.
So, any stories behind these
Well,
pictures?
Yeah, these are photos that I took. They were two of my favorite photos that I took in my work.
That's awesome.
This is a Ferrari 250 GTO that's worth about $50 million.
5-0.
5-0.
And it's red
Almost.
for all the listeners out there with a white circle with a number 10 on the side.
It looks like a pool, like a cue ball or something like that, right? This
Yeah, what do they
white
call
circle.
them? They call them like a golf ball or something,
Yeah.
where they would put the number on old race cars. I forget what the term was.
Hmm.
But I saw this racing around at an event on a track in Canada, actually, the Circuit Mont Tremblant.
Wow. Can you
I
say that?
cannot.
God
I'm
bless
not even
you.
going to try.
Gesundheit.
Not even going to try.
It's a great racetrack, and Ferrari held an event up there, and I had a good relationship with one of their PR people there. So they had me up there, and I photographed this from the side of the track.
That's awesome.
And, yeah,
How close were you? Because it looks pretty close. Or is
it looks pretty close. I was zoomed in and then cropped it.
Did it telephoto?
Yeah, I think I used a telephoto lens. I mean, yeah, it was from pretty far away. Not like,
But the real question is, how many people have you told that the guy in the passenger seat is you?
Yeah.
Well, this car actually, they asked me if I wanted to be driving it for the shot or to be taking the shot myself.
That looks like
All
Ben,
right.
that looks like Ben over there. In the
One
driver's seat,
second,
by the way.
everybody.
Yeah.
For the listeners here, they have no idea what you're talking about. So I want to hear you describe that car because I know what it is.
Uh-huh.
But
You
for
know-
our listeners, please.
You know what it is? Write it down. I want to test you afterwards. But anyway, carry on.
It starts with an M.
All right, here we go.
That's a McLaren 650S
Son of a
Spider
bitch.
that I was. I drove that car in the south of Spain, and that's at the Ascari Race Resort, which was like a racetrack that's basically for wealthy individuals to come
Like you.
and just for people like I was pretending I was like for and that was fun. We were just driving that car on local roads and around that racetrack to kind of see what it could do, and then we were doing photography on the track, and they said, do you want to come along for the photo session? Do you want moving shots? Because I took a lot of static shots.
Right.
I kept like moving the car in between shots.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're doing moving shots next, so you can either be in the car and we'll photograph you driving,
Right.
which I actually did on another trip with McLaren in a similar car.
Nice.
But for this one, I actually wanted to take the photos myself, and I was leaning out of a moving van.
I was going to ask you.
That's
and
awesome.
Tracking the shot.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
it's orange, which is my favorite color. So
It's my least favorite color. But
Yeah.
McLaren orange. That's their trademark color, just like Ferrari's is red.
Right, so you got into your love of cars at what age? Just so
Ooh,
context.
since I was a little kid, my brother and I would buy all the car magazines that we could. We would pool our allowance, and my nickel and your quarter. Like, what can we get? We save it up at the end of the month.
Wow. Is your dad into cars, or is like you and your brothers?
Really, it was mostly me and my brother. We would quiz each other on car trivia.
And did you buy like only car magazines? Like I grew up reading Rob Report, and I don't know any 11, 12-year-olds that read Rob Report,
Yeah.
but that was like my favorite magazine in the world.
Yeah, you see the fancy cars.
Yeah, it was fancy cars, yachts.
Right,
Like
right.
it was,
So we bought yacht magazines also because my parents had a boat.
What
Still
kind?
have it. It's a Carver 530, big power boat, 2 enormous engines. And yeah, we would take that all the way from Lake Champlain by the Canadian border down to Florida,
wow.
Wow.
the whole U.S. East Coast.
Do you have a cottage or something, or like what?
Nope, just the boat. We would
Just the
sleep on the boat.
Really?
Yeah, we did Pesach
Wow.
Seder on the boat.
Passover Seder. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my god, 2 of them.
Wait a
2
minute.
Seders, yeah.
You didn't take it on like the Canadian lake cottage
Nope.
areas?
No, we would
You
drive
used it
down like an
really
hour and a
on
half.
Atlantic Ocean.
Either on Lake Champlain, which is where they keep it most of the time,
Okay.
which is a huge lake. It would take like a couple of days to get from the north to the south
Wow.
of the lake, but it's very narrow, so it's not just like wide open water. It's a really nice place. I had 2 of my uncles, my mom's older and younger brothers, had houses on the lake, so we would go visit them.
Do you fish also? Or you just
We didn't do
hung
much
out on the boat?
fishing. My grandfather would come down. He also he lived around the corner from us in Montreal. My grandparents, and he liked fishing. So when he would come down to the boat, we would fish. Show me and my brother what we were doing wrong.
Nice.
You water ski off of it? Any sort
No,
of
too big for water ski.
Jet skis, nothing.
So we had a dinghy, like an
Okay.
inflatable.
dinghy?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I haven't heard that term. Is that a Canadian term, or do you call it
No,
dinghies and
it's really a
yeah,
dinghy.
okay.
It's a dinghy.
Dinghy's a dinghy. Okay.
Dinghy. Playing with my dinghy from a young age.
Would expect nothing less though.
So any other like crazy hobbies you're into besides obsessing over cars?
No. I like writing. I like cars, and that pretty much takes up all of my time.
Right, you're doing that today.
And
This is
that
what you do
much is-
now, right? You
That's sort of what I do now. No, I transitioned in my career. I kind of pivoted, and it all kind of ties into my divorce story also because this all happened around the same time.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah, I started working at an automotive technology company here in Israel, which is it's a huge growing sector in Israeli high tech, and I write content for them. So the last assignment that I did, even though it was a little bit more involved than some of the news articles that I would write in terms of how many stakeholders there are and who needs to see it before it can get published.
Right.
But otherwise, it was very much like the work that I used to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
So would you say you have a passion for it? Like this is what you know, this is what you enjoy. Like, are you
Yeah.
enjoying it now type of thing?
I do, yeah. I mean, the high points of my career were when I was a journalist.
Right.
Those were the fun things. Driving a car like this one on a racetrack in Spain is a lot of fun. But despite what Instagram may tell you, those experiences are few and far between. Unless you want to be one of these journalists who's constantly on the road. And I have colleagues like that. They're never home. They fly from one of these press events to another, and they live out of a suitcase. And it seems very exciting, but it's not for me.
Why?
Because I want to have a home life. It's also hard to travel if you keep kosher and Shabbat. So I have to plan my events around where am I going to be for Shabbat? Where am I going to get food from? I'd usually fly to Europe from Israel for 2-3 days maybe, and then fly back. I would just bring some food with me,
Right.
and try not to get too comfortable out there in the diaspora.
Right.
One trip I did actually was just one day, and I was in constant motion for 24 hours. I didn't bring a suitcase. I packed a couple of sandwiches, my camera, my laptop, a change of clothes, and from when I left from my apartment to when I got back there was pretty much exactly 24 hours. And, you know, I went to the airport in a cab or whatever, got on the plane. They had the car waiting for me at the airport in Germany. I drove it all day, drove it back to the airport, got on the plane, came back. In like, with nothing but the stuff in my backpack.
Wow,
That was like one of the best press trips.
that's awesome. You had another trip recently. I was following you on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right? Was that your most recent trip?
Yeah. So now it's kind of funny because I didn't expect when I switched from journalism into like marketing content, I didn't expect that I would be like going to a racetrack again for a long time, unless it was like out of pocket. But yeah, the company that I work for, we launched this initiative where we're sponsoring a racing series. So we went to the racetrack a couple of times, once in Belgium and once before that in Italy, to go and like, you know, see the races that we're sponsoring and meet the people that we've been working with.
What was that like?
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. There was one like 24-hour race in Belgium, and like we went with a contingent of people from the company, and some of us, you know, are also, you know, Sabbath observant for our broader listening audience. So we rented a house like right by the racetrack, and I'm like making kiddush, blessing the wine on Friday night, and you know I had to like pause for a second as like all the cars went by.
Whizzing by.
Wow.
So yeah, that part's been fun, and we have a couple of these like professional grade $20,000 racing simulators set up in the office.
Wow.
So on some days when I don't have the kids to come home to, and really nobody to come home to, if I'm not picking up the kids from school and gone at the end of the day,
Kindergarten. Yeah.
right? Then really, you know, I'm walking into an empty house. So you know, I'll work late and then go over to the main office and just sit there for an hour trying to perfect my lap times.
Wow.
And embarrassing myself terribly, realizing just how far I am.
And how many kids do you have?
2 that I know of.
Okay.
You can never really be that.
How many that you don't know of?
What?
Good question.
Boy, girl, boy,
I have a
girl.
boy and a girl, so I've got both those bases covered. I have a boy who's 6.5, going on 10, and a girl who's 3, and
Going on 16.
yeah.
And do either of them have your car passion?
My son is, you know, he's also getting very interested in cars, and he can tell me if an electric car is passing by or like, you know.
No way.
Boston, yeah.
At the age of 6.
Yeah.
They've got the blue icon somewhere on their car usually.
He can tell from the noise it makes.
Oh yeah.
He's like that sounds like an electric car. And sometimes it's a hybrid, and I'm like, well, it's a hybrid, not like an EP. But you know, if it's in electric mode, he's like, it sounds like an electric car.
Yeah, the hardest thing for me when I was a kid, because I know all my neighbors' cars and their license plates.
Oh, funny.
So I know whoever was coming down the road.
That's good.
But the 2 cars I couldn't figure out were Lincoln Town Cars versus limousines. It was horrible for me. I could not figure that out for the life of me.
Yeah, the town cars often turned into a limousine.
I know, but there was one extra window. But it took me years to figure that out. And then when I started driving, I could tell police cars by the headlights behind me. So I knew the headlights of the police cars at night,
Nice.
which were like Crown Vics and Lincoln Mercuries, and so I'm also a car person, but like specs and all that I don't really get into.
Right.
But like I know what I like, and what's your favorite car?
I'm partial to Ferraris personally.
Which
All
one?
Italian
Which
cars. 250 GTO would be pretty nice.
All right.
Mm.
Mine is a Ferrari F355, yellow.
In yellow, interesting. Yeah.
I thought orange
really
was your
like that
favorite
one.
color.
I know, not for sports cars, not for cars. I haven't found an orange except for that
Huh.
McLaren. That's
It's
really solid looking orange car.
Yeah,
Right.
I dream of one day owning a 355 Spider.
Yeah.
With the 6-speed.
Yeah.
I started
Beautiful.
doing those automated transmissions or manualized automatics around then. So a lot of people went for those, you know, because it was like the new thing. But like they didn't work very well.
Right.
So what you really want is the one with the manual. It's got like the exposed shift gate and that real tactile feeling.
I'm just curious, do you think that's going to be a bit outdated? Like we're talking about, you know, especially with the company that you're with, we're talking about self-driving cars. So, you know, is that the whole idea of driving cars? Do you think that's going to be something that's a thing of the past?
It's a good question. We don't know. I told my son maybe he won't even need a driver's license
My daughter is hoping she doesn't have to drive.
Yeah.
The anxiety is just, she can't even imagine.
Well, in that case, I hope your daughter doesn't have to drive also.
I'm working on it, and I will teach her how not to. It's like
Uh-huh.
when, speaking of roller skating, rollerblading, ice skating, so the trick about doing those and not freaking out every 2 seconds is not to worry about the people behind you.
Mm.
Just worry about the people in front of you. The people behind you will move out of the way or figure out how not to hit you.
Yep.
So once you get that in your head, then you're like free to go. But it's that always, what's happening behind me? What's happening around me?
Right.
And if you can just realize that you focus, you do what you're supposed to be doing, 99% of the time you'll be fine.
My parents always had that classic line, it's not you we're worried about, it's the other driver. They used to always say that if I was going out New Year's or any sort of high season on the roads, they'd always say that. Didn't stop me, but
Yeah. You're asking if I give my sons my love of my kids my love of cars. I made this was a great project that I undertook. I made my son like this flip book that has like car logos of like
Oh, wow.
maybe like 50 car brands.
Mhm.
And I put all like logos and the name of the company, which company owns them, where they're made, how expensive they are.
So you have like the whole Daimler line there.
Yeah. And so he's really learned it. But like what really got me is like every time he opens it, he reads the inscription that I put in it.
Oh, nice.
I made it for his birthday.
That's really
And
sweet.
I wrote something about like may you always be as like inquisitive and curious as you are right now. And he reads it and he just smiles every time.
That's sweet.
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really great. So it sounds like you have a really like special connection with your kids. Like
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Mm.
My daughter was only like a year old when I moved out, and but I was really glad that I already had like built a strong relationship with her.
Mhm. And do you have
my son,
them?
of course.
You have them. What's your arrangement?
50-50.
Okay.
It's a little hard to follow. We were talking about this just last night when we were hanging out. That we started out with it was always like 50-50 arrangement. Although at the beginning my daughter was more with her mom.
She was younger.
because- Yeah, she was still nursing and very attached to her mother, which she still is, understandably. But yeah, so we initially set out. I have this day every week. I have the kids every week on these days, and you have them on these days. But then the weekend would alternate because no one parent is going to have them every weekend. That wouldn't be fair for anybody. So that made things we actually found kind of difficult. It was easier for us as parents to kind of plan our schedules, knowing like Mondays and Wednesdays and every
Set
other
days.
Thursday. Yeah. So, but we actually ended up switching to a schedule where it's the same. It's like a 3-2-2 arrangement. It's hard to split up a 7-day week
Right.
evenly, right?
Mm.
So, but it alternates week to week.
Right.
So if I have them, well, say my ex has them this weekend, so she had them Thursday, Friday, Saturday. She drops them off at school and kindergarten on Sunday morning. I pick them up Sunday. That's our switch over is like drop off and pick up. So I'll have them Sunday, Monday, and then drop them off, and then she'll have them Tuesday, and I'll have them the next
Right,
weekend.
Thursday, Friday. Yeah. So I think what the lawyers do is instead of splitting up with 7 days,
Mhm.
they split up 14 days. And they see it in like 2-week periods,
Right.
and that's easier to split.
Yeah, I think that's how our mediator tackled it. Also,
And how long have you been divorced for?
just about 2 years.
Hmm.
Yeah, a little bit plus with like the separation.
Right.
We separated when I moved into this apartment,
Mhm.
and then it just took a little while to work out the paperwork, finalize everything.
And did the kids, such a young age, did they understand what was happening? Do they understand the whole situation? Or is it something you've ever talked to them about? Or
Yeah, sure. We talk about it, and there's always, I always try to make room for discussion about it. Yes, of course you miss your mother. She's your mother. Like that doesn't detract from me.
Right.
That you miss your mother. You're allowed to miss your mother. You want to call her? That's no problem. And the same thing, vice versa. but yeah, initially, my daughter was too young to really wrap her head around it. My son also, so it's something that had to evolve. He was, he's only 6.5 now, and it's been 2 years. At first he was actually in kindergarten. There's a complex like right next door to here. You put your head out on the balcony and look to the left. You can see the building, and that's where my daughter is now also. And so we rode by here on our bikes on the way to his kindergarten, and I said, you see that house over there? And he looked at it. He calls it the Blue Door House just because there's blue shutters on the balcony doors, not on the front door. And everybody else is like, why is this called the Blue Door House?
It's okay. I called it the swimming pool house.
The swimming pool.
All right, yes, Ben.
When I came in the first time, there was a swimming pool hanging over there.
Inflatable, kids pool. I just put that away for the season. I was like, all right, got to give up on summer at some point.
Although it's still beautiful outside, actually, for November when we're recording.
It's not swim weather though. I have to take apart the pool.
So I told him, I'm going to move into this house, and you're going to be, sometimes with Ima, with your mother, and sometimes with me, and you'll have 2 houses, and I'm still your dad, and she's still your mom, and initially, we just phrased it in such a positive way that he didn't really have anything to hold on to be afraid about. The reality set in over time, and sometimes he tells his mother like, I want to be at my father's house, and vice versa. But by and large, it's been pretty smooth. A very adaptable child.
Right. What about you in terms of adaptable? Like, did you have? I think I've asked this question of a few of our guests already, but as it's happening, did you have any sort of fears? And I'm asking you especially because I would say your kids are younger than, I don't know if there's an average, but they're very young. So like, did you have any sort of fears, trepidations, and how have you managed that since?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's certain anxieties that come with like, oh, I'm solely responsible for these kids' well-being right now. Like they're in my care. I need to make sure that I don't fall off a ladder putting something away, and don't shout at them, and make sure that they have clean clothes and food packed to go to school or kindergarten in the morning. So it's a lot of responsibility. There's this story they tell about the town with 10 Jewish men, right? Not to make it like too Jewy a story, but there's a town with
nothing. It must be an interesting town.
Right. There's 10 Jewish men in this town, and of course you need
20 opinions.
5 synagogues. You need 10 Jewish men to have a quorum for prayers, right? And so when there were 10 Jewish men in the town, they always had minyan. That's what they call the quorum, right? And then an 11th family moved into the neighborhood, and they could never get a quorum together because everybody always thought like, well, it's his time.
The next one,
right? Let the other 10 make it this time. I don't have to go. Everybody thought that, or half of them thought that, whatever. So, when I have the kids with me, it feels like, like the 10 men situation where like, no, I have a responsibility. This is all on me, as opposed to when the mother's in the picture. Also, I can take a break.
Yeah, backup.
Yeah. I have backup. Can you put the kids to sleep tonight? You're packing their lunches. Good. Like when they're.
I'm going to go to the bathroom for 4 minutes.
Yeah, seriously. Please do not murder each other.
Did you have to learn any like new skills or things that you? I don't know. You moved here a long time ago, so you've been on your own for a while. But
yes.
Were there any things that you learned or figured out what the kids like to eat or?
Yeah, so cooking's been a new thing. Like I used to prepare myself food, but like it wasn't always like balanced, nutritious meal. It wasn't always all that tasty either. I would just kind of throw something together, and if it worked for me, it worked for me.
Right.
Suddenly I've got 2 picky little mouths to feed. So definitely had to adapt to that, and also other things. Like having a daughter in diapers is different from having a son in diapers. have to learn other things, and that was just something that we were dealing with recently. I was like, I'm proud of myself for being able to step up. When I can tell my baby mama that that our daughter's having difficulty with X, Y, and Z, and she's like, oh wow, I hadn't noticed that, and what did you notice? How is she sleeping? How is she breathing? She's had some respiratory issues.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Wow.
Not too drastic, thankfully, but something we're trying to track and take care of. It gives me pride to be like, a really responsible
Hands-on.
father, and hands-on, and not just like, hey, he's the fun parent that you get to visit and like anything goes, and mom will take care of it. And when I can make them food, when my ex-wife asks me like, hey, what meals have you been making that they like? What has that been going for you? And I can give her a recipe. I'm like, what's going on here? This doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But if I can tell her about the pasta dish that I make them that they really like, then that's awesome.
Right, and they might be going to her house and saying, I want Abba's this, Abba's that. So
Yeah.
she has to come to you for that. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's it's a point of pride that I'm able to rise up to the occasion, and parent them, take care of their needs, physical needs, and their emotional well-being, and try to give them a happy home and a good childhood, despite everything else.
And financial needs as well. That's
Yeah.
a big one.
Yeah, financial is a big one. Going from a 2-income home to a 1-income home. Some expenses, of course, get split. But I still need to pay rent on an apartment that's big enough to house all of us half the time. I don't pay less when they're not with me.
Right.
Their room just sits here empty like
Right.
it is right now. There are certain financial burdens, but thankfully I got a steady job right around the time that I was
Right.
splitting up.
I was going to ask you, and how do you, in actuality, I know in my experience, so I've got older, just for our audience, I've got 5 children ranging from 8 to 19. So I could lean on my older kids, even my youngest who's 8. There's already a certain level of independence, but at your stage where the kids are still, your oldest is 6, how do you actually manage, the sort of work-life balance as as at this point in your life, being at the stage that you're at as a single dad, how do you manage that? Like, how do you actually manage the two?
That's a good question. It can be tricky. Thankfully, I work in an environment with a lot of other parents. Most of them are married, but they understand. Of course, you need to leave at 3:30, 4 o'clock to go and pick up your kids, and you're going to be offline until. I might have to sign on later in the evening to compensate and to get my work done. But, they're pretty understanding because they're all in a similar situation. It is tricky juggling the two. But, you make it work.
But you're marketing and writing. You're not like sales. You don't have anything that's like come down to the fire. You have deadlines, of course.
Yeah.
But like if you do it at 4 o'clock or you do it at 8 o'clock, as long as you're on, I assume it's a lot easier than someone that's like involved in sales or has to be in front of a computer all the time or
Right.
something that has to be on all the time.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, as long as the work gets done in a timely fashion.
Do you ever have to lean on any? Do you have anybody who can help you? Or have you ever needed that? Like, do you ever use babysitters or even friends or anything like that? Or you're pretty much self-sufficient in that sense?
I like to be self-reliant.
Right, self-reliance is a better word.
Yeah. There are friends that I could call upon. If I can't make it, something's come up and I can't make it to pick up my kids. To call somebody or to hire a babysitter. My ex-wife usually has a babysitter or two that she works with. She's like, if you ever need her, you should call her also. I prefer to just do it myself.
And was this flexibility when you were looking for a job? Did you have this in mind?
That I was going to be getting divorced. What do you mean?
Yeah, where you were looking for something where you could be more around. It sounds like it was around COVID time. So
Yeah. Well, okay. So maybe we should rewind a little bit and,
Sure.
and set the baseline of
Yeah.
how the divorce happened. And I mean, it didn't all happen overnight. You know, the marriage was on a rocky foundation, built on a rocky foundation. What's the term? A rocky foundation.
that's fine.
Works.
That's fine.
All right. Shaky foundation. But then, you know, COVID hit, and, you know, we had around this same time that my daughter was born. It was like only shortly after. She was only a few months old. So we had a newborn at home. We had a kid who was now home from kindergarten with no structure, no daycare in his life. So he was home. We both basically lost our jobs. She was put on, what do you call halat? Unpaid leave.
Yeah, unpaid leave.
So she was put on unpaid leave when Corona started, and I was a freelancer, and my client base just froze overnight. Everybody that I was working with, like my steady clients, all froze their budgets for freelance work. They're like, we don't know what's happening. We're gonna get by on our in-house staff, and that's it. So we're not buying any of your work right now. And I had actually had like a bunch of new projects for like the first time in a long time. I had some new projects that I was working on that I was really excited about. They were starting to build momentum. I had actually put in some work on one of these, a lot of work, on the basis that it was going to pay when we launched, but we never launched. So, you know, all the work that I had been doing for the past, you know, probably a couple of months, I never got paid for. And obviously these new projects all froze. So yeah, we were both out of work. We had two young kids at home. And, you know, there were lockdowns and we couldn't leave the house. Neither of us had any family here. You know, we each moved here alone, so we didn't have any family on the one hand to lean on, also to take care of and worry about. And then my wife at the time broke both of her ankles
Wow.
and was in a wheelchair for like 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So in a very short amount of time, we went from two parents with one kid to two parents with two kids, and now it was basically one parent with three kids, three people to take care of.
Right.
As much as, you know, she did not want to have to be taken care of, she was very, you know, independent, an active person. Didn't not like being taken care of, which kind of added its own element of stress.
Sure.
Because, you know, I'm trying to take care of her and she doesn't want to be taken care of. And, you know, I had a hard time, you know, keeping it all together myself. And, you know, once her ankles healed and she was back on her feet, she's like, yeah, we're getting a divorce.
Wow.
So, you know, that was, like I said, the load of bricks that broke the camel's back. Because it wasn't just a straw at that point. And the camel was in ailing health as it was.
Right.
And yeah, right around that time, it was on my daughter's first birthday. We actually both started new jobs. And shortly after that, I found this place, moved in here, and that's where we're at.
Okay. So we like to, you know, that this podcast is for people that have been through divorce and dads that are surviving and being productive after. So we like to kind of focus on what you were going through, what your emotions, how you dealt with the process of divorce and getting into that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that was certainly a journey and an ordeal, and you know, a process that I think ultimately made me a better, stronger person as a result. You know, I had two emotions before I went through this kind of life-altering experience. I was either happy or I was angry. I was never sad. I was never forlorn or, you know, any other of the range of human emotions. I had two modes. And now, you know, I might be, you know, a lot more sad than I ever had been in the years prior, but, you know, at least I know how to feel sadness. I know how to feel longing. I know how to feel, if I feel sad, it's not somebody else's fault. I don't have to get angry at somebody because I'm sad. That's not to say that I'm sad all the time. I'm
Sure.
not. But it's a new life experience to be able to experience.
Do you know where that happy, angry, that how you became that way? Is it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems from my childhood, from my upbringing. That I'm not going to get into the whole dynamics now, but things that I wasn't even aware of. That when you grow up with something, by definition, that is your normal, right?
Sure.
Whatever you experienced in your upbringing, that's normal. And then you get older and you realize, and I'm sure just about everybody realizes this, because what is normal, and what do we, what human being as a parent is capable of delivering a perfectly balanced childhood to their children.
Right. We all mess up one way or the other, right?
Right.
So,
I'm just trying to mess up different from my parents.
Right.
well said. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did you find those new emotions? Did you get help?
I did get help, and I made certain decisions about my own. When we first started dating, my ex-wife told me that one thing that she really liked about me was that I was emotionally intelligent, which isn't a term that I was even familiar with at the time.
But you had it.
But apparently I had it.
And have it.
I could be like deliberate and thoughtful about what I was experiencing and how other people were feeling. So it kind of built on that, but turned it inwards.
Right, I was about to say that's an outward thing, so you were
Yes.
able to turn it inward.
Yeah, and start to really examine how I was feeling and what I was experiencing, and almost more importantly, what I was going to do as a result. So I started going to therapy. I found a great therapist who's been a huge help in helping me wrap my head around things and to understand myself better. But a lot of it also, first I need to decide that I want to go to therapy, which is a big first step. I had never gone to therapy before. And certain decisions that I don't want things to turn out the way they will turn out if I don't change something right now. So for example, when the marriage fell apart, and I'd really been fighting to try to keep our family together, the first instinct was to be really pissed at the woman who was leaving me and breaking up my home. But I realized I didn't want that kind of relationship with her. I didn't want to put my kids through that. I didn't want to make the situation worse.
Right.
And I didn't want to carry that anger with me all the time. And I told myself, I need to make a change in my character and in my perspective and the way that I conduct myself. And this will be the hardest part, but the most important. The challenge immediately in front of me is not to be angry at my ex-wife. And man, that was hard. It's the first person you want to be angry at. But I made that decision, and to the best of my abilities, and increasing abilities, I think. I followed through on it because I didn't want to catch my kids up in this dynamic of two parents who are angry at each other. It's toxic in so many ways. And to her credit, she responded in kind. I'm sure she went through, a similar kind of thought process herself. And it's difficult to keep up, for sure. It's like a whole kettle of fish.
I was going to ask you, are you saying that because there's ongoing communications?
There is.
So is that why? Is that why you're saying it's difficult to sort of keep that mentality or keep that consciousness in front of you at all times, to not get angry and things like that?
Yeah, I need to remind myself, first of all, I don't need to get angry at her. If she does something that upsets me, why do I really care? This person is in my life, for sure. I don't need to feel injured by something that she says or does, or doesn't say or do.
You can't control that.
I can't control that, and it doesn't need to affect
Well, you
me.
can't. You can't
You
control,
can't control
how you
her
feel,
actions.
but you can control. We can control our. I'm asking. I'm sort of saying you can control your responses, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. she said she was going to IKEA, or that she had gone to IKEA. Now, when I said I was going to IKEA, there are things I need around the apartment. I don't have a car, even though I'm a crazy car guy. And I don't have time to run out to IKEA. There isn't one in the city in which we all live, or, well, in your city either.
There's none in my city.
There's none in your
Right.
city. There's none in our city. It's like a journey. You got to go to IKEA. It's probably like that in most places, even if you do have it in your town. It's like
Still a trip.
Yeah, it's a whole trip.
And it's designed to make you be there for hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I used to work down the street from an IKEA here in Israel, in Netanya, and we would just pop over there for lunch.
Right.
I'm like, oh yeah, we need more salad bowls. Okay, guys, I'm gonna go get salad bowls.
I have to interrupt for a second. I was listening. I always talk about what my favorite podcast, one of my favorite Smartless, and Will Arnett was saying he feels IKEA is Swedish for fight. Because he says you see husbands and wives, couples go there and they're like, we don't need it, but I want it, but we don't need it because the whole store looks so enticing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought it was a great line. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
we went to IKEA a lot when we were a lot. And we would go to IKEA when we were dating, when we were married.
cheap ice
There was
cream,
a-
and all the food was cheap there. But anyway,
Yeah. There was a lot of. Well, I guess we just have different tastes.
you don't like that bright neon light that they have there.
Oh my god! I don't even
Anyway.
like most of the furniture in this apartment. It's my stuff.
It's functional. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying yes, you went to IKEA, or you were going to
Yeah,
IKEA.
I was gonna go to IKEA, and when I told her I was planning on going to IKEA, she was like, "Oh, can I send you a list of stuff that I want?" Like, I don't have to buy anything for you. You're my ex-wife. I'm not shopping for you. Of course. Like that's my internal voice. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, if I can get it, then no problem. I didn't end up going, and then like a while later, I heard that she went because she just moved into a new apartment. It's right down the street here. I can practically see it from here.
Yeah, she didn't tell you.
And she didn't tell me. So she doesn't have to tell me. First of all, this is what I told myself. I had to remind myself, like, climb down from that ledge a little bit. She doesn't have to tell you that she's going to IKEA. She doesn't have to offer to pick up anything for you. She doesn't have to ask if you need anything. And also, if you need something, if you need a favor, then ask. So I came back from, like, my first reaction was like, it was okay for you to ask me to get you something, but you didn't offer when you were going. Why do I need to feel injured about that? I don't.
Right.
It's such a small thing. It's a ridiculous thing to be offended about. And like this internal voice in my head, like, that doesn't need to prevail. You don't need to just follow whatever your instinct is.
Is
Your
this
first instinct.
is this something that you've come to on your own, but with the aid of therapy? Like, do you feel that therapy has helped you come to these realizations?
Yeah,
So your
absolutely.
therapist will give you tools to sort of work these things through, or just by virtue of speaking it out with your therapist, you've been able
talk it
to.
through. We talk it through. We discuss, my reaction to things, and where's that coming from? What part of my childhood is that?
Wow.
Which
And are
version
you
of
doing
me
it
is
all
that?
through talk therapy?
Yeah, we meet, and he lives nearby.
Would you say that? I mean, is this? I don't know if it's like a cynical way of looking at it, or maybe it's a practical way. Would you say that learning to let go of expectations? Because I was sort of hearing that in what you're saying.
Yeah.
But is that overly simplistic, or is that sound advice you would say for our audience, for example, in terms of communicating with their children's mom?
Yeah, to kind of accept that this person doesn't owe you anything, and to remind yourself that you want to have a good relationship with this person despite everything else. And yeah, I guess that's really the crux of it. What kind of relationship do I want to have with this person, and what am I going to do about it? And I don't need to feel injured if she doesn't answer a message that I sent, or if I feel like something's unduly on me. I can seek to fix it, or I can leave it alone, but I don't need to feel injured by any of this. And thankfully, like, most of the time this doesn't come up. We have a very good co-parenting relationship. That's basically what our marriage was before we got divorced. We were like down to co-parents who are cohabitating. And now we're co-parents who are not cohabitating, and we have our own lives, and we have our free time when we have our free time. And, you know, the cohabitating part, the one family nucleus didn't work out. We're still co-parenting. We still communicate on a very, very regular basis, several times a day. We're like texting each other. Just this morning, you know, this has been one of my weekends off. And, you know, I spent a good part of it catching up on sleep. They said you can't do this. I caught up on sleep. And in the morning, not early morning, late morning, I heard a tiny little knock at the door. And there was my daughter at the door with her mom, telling me to, you know, come to the park with them. It's a great park right across the street. So so we spent, you know, a good chunk of the day, the four of us, together in the park.
Wow.
Yeah. Because she lives just on the other side of the park. You know, we're all neighbors here, and yeah, thankfully we have a good co-parenting relationship. This is the way that I kind of think of it. I don't know much about game theory. I took a class that touched on this in college. I understand game theory about it as well as I understand women, which evidently is not very good.
Good thing it's not a podcast on women.
I can tell you how marriage fails. I can't tell you how it succeeds.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Not yet.
Right.
Right.
So if you take a look at the situation of two people getting along, right? Especially, you know, when the stakes are higher and the emotional baggage is more there, and there's more potential for things to go wrong, right? So it's a binary decision for each person at every point, at every potential point of conflict. They both have to choose that we want to not be angry and combative with each other, right? So that means there's like 4 decisions taking place in any like potential conflict, right? I have to choose that I'm not going to be angry and not going to be combative, and she has to choose the same. The likelihood is that one of us is going to choose the other, right? That one of us is going to be like, you know what, fuck it. I don't have to deal with this shit. I don't have to deal with your shit, and like not take the high road. In order for two people to get along in that situation, and at every single juncture, we both have to decide that we're going to cooperate. So I get that it's a rare thing for two people with that much history and with that much potential, at least, for animosity, to get along as well as I do with my ex-wife. Is really something that I could only wish on other divorced parents.
I'm curious. So you're talking about the game theory, and both the ex-wife and ex-husband have to sort of make that decision.
Yeah.
To act in the best interests of everybody involved. So I'm curious. Do you have, this may be a difficult question, but do you have any advice for anybody in our audience out there who's thinking, okay, well, that sounds great when both sides are on board in that sense. But what about where one person feels that, the other, my ex-wife is just not willing to be reasonable, or, what, do you have any advice for somebody who's thinking that?
It's tough. Thankfully, that's not something that I've had so much to deal with. Like there are times when things don't go so smoothly, even when we're married. I remember one incident where she had this tendency to leave the house without her key. Right, I worked from home. She would leave without her key. If I had to go out, I would lock the door, and if she came back and didn't have her key, then well, now I can't get into the house. Where are you? Like, well, it's not really my problem, right? I can try to prepare for this, but like it's your responsibility to carry your house key. So one time, I had gone to pick up our son from kindergarten, and then we went out to the park and we set up with friends. We were having like a picnic, and she calls me. She's like, "Well, I'm locked out of the house." So I'm trying to find a solution. I'm like, okay, well, we did leave a spare key with this person, or maybe, if you just need a place. She's like, I'm supposed to nurse our baby now. I'm like, maybe you can go over to the neighbor's house, and I get that what she was hearing was, no, I'm not coming to help you. I'm trying to find a solution that will get her taken care of and also not have to upset the situation with my son. And she starts, bitching me out. She's like, why aren't you coming to help me? I'm like, what, you're just going to leave us locked out of the house? And she's getting really, really ticked off. Which, I guess I can understand where she was coming from. But my response was, hey, what's with the hostility? Instead of like, you're yelling at me, you should bring your key. Like, to kind of de-escalate the hostility. Right. And no, what I'm trying to do is find a solution that'll work for everybody. If this solution will not work, then we'll figure something else out. I will come and let you into the house. I'm not like locking you out of spite that you didn't carry your key, right?
Right.
So, similar sort of things. I mean, obviously not the same situation, although not so dissimilar. There was a time when like I gave her a spare key to the house, to this apartment, and she lost it. And she's like, I need to pick up something for the kids, and I don't have my key. Like,
right.
I can't give you another one. You can't
Right.
keep losing. It was like 2 keys to my apartment that she
Right.
lost. That has the potential for conflict, and my response could have been like, I can't trust you with another key now. I don't think she has a key to my apartment now. There's one in the lockbox outside. It's fine, but
We'll erase that part.
I'm not giving you the combination. So yeah, there's always like, we're not always matched up. We're not always like both entering whatever exchange with like the best mindset and the best intentions for the other person. Conflicts arise. You try to de-escalate. If you're dealing with somebody who is, by and large, a reasonable, rational person, which I have to say my ex-wife is. She's not an emotional person. I think that was part of the problem in the marriage, was like, an emotional disconnect. But she's a rational person. Dealing with a rational person is, obviously easier than an irrational one. If you're dealing with somebody who's just fundamentally irrational, or even in that instance, just behaving completely irrationally, then yeah, it can be difficult. You have to figure out a way to remove your own emotions from the situation and try to de-escalate and try to meet the other person on common ground. But again, you have to be dealing with somebody who is also, behaving rationally, thinking rationally, and, isn't out to get you.
Right, and that kind of ties into my next question. It's a great segue, because I don't think anybody, including you and everything you've just said, would say that any man has to be, and it goes both ways, but from the context of a man, in this situation, has to be a doormat. So, in other words, we can have an opinion, right? Or you can have an opinion about your children, for example. Let's say, what school you want to send your child to. And your ex-wife may have a difference of opinion. So you're not advocating for saying that, okay, well, you've got to just sort of subjugate your opinion to the next one, right? So I guess that can be really tricky. I don't think there is an answer per se. There isn't a one size fits all. It depends on the circumstances. But is that fair to say? You're not saying that anybody has to sort of, nobody has a right to have an opinion. Obviously, you may have an opinion that's completely different than hers. That's just a part of reality, right?
Yeah, we do have some differences in opinions, me and my ex-wife. Thankfully, they're not like fundamental differences. There's no like huge schism. Although, one of the elements I think that led to our divorce was that we had a religious home together. We were Sabbath observant, and we kept kosher in our house, and she really didn't want to anymore. And it's kind of incompatible. There are some people who make that sort of thing work. At the time, it didn't feel like that could work. So, we do have our disagreements, and I think a previous version of myself, who was more rigid and more judgmental and more prone to anger, wouldn't be okay with, my ex-wife taking our kids to the beach and driving to Tel Aviv on Shabbat. On Saturday. I had to come to terms with, this is the situation. I can't impose my views on her. what she does with the kids, like I just have to trust that she's going to give them the best environment that she can, and I know that she loves them, and I know she's a level-headed person who's capable of putting the kids' needs first, and that she will. It won't always be on the same values. We won't always see eye to eye, and we don't always have to. But there are certain fundamentals. Even though she's not religious anymore, we still agreed that we would send our kids to religious schools because she sees the value in religious education, even if she doesn't buy into the system so much herself anymore. So there are fundamental things that we still agree on, and disagreements arise. If it's something I feel like I really can't live with, then I'll say so. Or if I just disagree with something, then I'll tell her, and she'll tell me the same if the situation is inversed.
And something key that I think you said when you were describing how you were able to co-parent was you were co-parenting and cohabitating.
Yes.
So it sounds like you already kind of figured out a dynamic, how to deal with these differences pretty much.
Yeah.
And then you just decided that cohabitating wasn't going to work. So I think that is something very special when it comes to people getting divorced, and most don't have that experience before, which makes the post-divorce relationship harder to figure out because you're not there all the time to have those conversations that are needed to do co-things.
Right.
So I think that also, is something that it jumped out at me that you explained it that way, and that's how it kind of seems like it transitioned outside of that as well.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I can imagine that a lot of divorced dads might not have been such involved parents before the divorce, and then find themselves in a situation where they either have to rise up to this new challenge of being an involved parent, or don't end up seeing their kids much.
Or they want to. It was, I'm going to work, or I'm doing whatever, and this is my part of the house, and you're taking care of the kids. But now that, there's two different houses, there should be two different opinions, kind of, and trying to navigate that. Yeah. And having a voice.
True. Well, we always talk things out when we were married, and we still talk things out, insofar as they're relevant to the upbringing of our shared children. And thankfully, I was an involved parent before, and I'm that much. I don't know. Am I more involved now? There's more on me when the kids are with me, but I already had a strong relationship with my kids, and I already knew how to be a parent to them. Right. So in that regard, it wasn't such a huge shock. Like, what do I do with these people? How do I feed them? Right. This is something that mom would usually do. I mean, there are things like that, but figure it out like I figure out anything else.
And it sounds like you have that. I have that also. Like, there's not much in life that I can't do in my mind. Like, whatever I've tried to do, except for playing guitar and singing on key, everything else I've ever tried in my life, I've been able to do and accomplish. And it sounds like you kind of have that same drive based on kind of your background.
Yeah, maybe. I don't feel like I'm good at a lot of things, but being there for my kids, I think is one of them, and other things I have to figure out along the way. And writing about cars is something that I'm good at, that I feel like I'm capable of doing. So I have those skills, and I'm going to stick with them.
Right.
One other thing, about the whole dynamic between me and my ex-wife, is that we didn't try to, put each other through the ringer when it came to the divorce proceedings. We went through mediation, and, I can't say this would work for everybody because, it's that same dynamic of you both have to want to get through this amicably as possible. And unfortunately, that's not always the case, suffice it to say. Probably not the case in the majority of situations. But we both entered it. She waived certain rights, I waived certain rights, We both agreed that, you know, the kids need both of their parents. She wasn't out to try to get the kids away from me, because she knows that children need their father. Children definitely need their mother. They also need their father. So, you know, there wasn't a wrestling match over custody, thankfully. And in terms of our assets, we didn't have a lot of assets, so there wasn't much to argue over. But, you know, the Israeli system where we live, you know, presumes that the father is going to support the mother. Now, part of our whole marriage dynamic was that, you know, I supported her through grad school and in starting her career, and she really, you know, ran with her career, to her credit. But, you know, at the same time, I was like picking up the kids and spending time with them after school. And, you know, I was at home too, working from home, but I was there to, like, you know, do laundry and dishes. And, you know, she wasn't working while she was in grad school. And, you know, so I already had like an experience of being an at-home parent. It's not like I just went to school, went to work every day and came back and like, okay, good night, kids. I was involved, and you know, I already knew what that was like, and already had that good relationship with my kids. And I think part of the dynamic with our marriage that led to our divorce was that there was some resentment that I wasn't like out pursuing a career and making more money like she was. Somebody had to be at home holding things together, and I was working, but I was a freelance writer. I wasn't like raking in the cash. I had more lucrative contracts at some times than others. It was time for me to start, you know, pursuing my business a little bit more in a concerted manner. So yeah, there weren't a lot of assets to divide up, but she also certainly didn't want to put me in a situation where I was paying her child support while also taking care of the kids half the time, based on an income that like wouldn't support that. And she realized that. She realized that prospect, although she would have been able to pursue that legally, was untenable. She didn't try to squeeze more oil out of me than I had, thankfully. And, you know, I can't say that it was exactly equal, but like, you know, as part of the negotiations, there were like things like, I don't know, her retirement fund from the job that she had after she graduated from grad school. And, you know, I put her through grad school and, you know, introduced her to the people who hired her for her first job, who hired her. I'm not saying that I got her the job, but I helped her get in the door. The rest, you know, she did very well. But where was I going with this?
That you guys went to mediation and
Oh, right, yeah, and she had like, you know, things like, you know, a retirement fund, and the mediator was like, okay, well, you know, Noah technically should get, you know, half of the retirement fund down the line with its, you know, vested interest and whatever, based on this. And I was like, that's not my money. You know, I don't want that money. Am I thinking like in 30 years that I'm going to want that money, that I'm going to like create this conflict now over money like in the distant future? Like, she got that through her job, you know? That's her money. So I think she could see that I was also, even if it wasn't exactly equivalent, she could have gotten more money, tried to squeeze more money out of me than I was like giving up with the retirement fund or whatever. But there was a dynamic
give and take.
Yes, a give and take, and I think it clearly made the whole procedure go more smoothly. And again, it was down to, you know, both of us wanting to get through this intact and as amicably as possible, despite, you know, the emotional dynamic that plays a huge part in it. But, you know, I had another friend who's divorced and remarried and has kids with his new wife. I mean, they've been married for like 10 years now, and has a kid with his previous wife, and like his divorce did not go well. And she's still like a thorn in his side. And, you know, he was telling me, you gotta lawyer up. You gotta protect yourself. you don't know what she might do. I'm like, you're right, I don't know what she might do, but I don't think that she's going to take, this sort of aggressive approach, and I don't want to be the one to initiate that. So I did. I left myself vulnerable. She could have, lawyered up and taken the shark approach.
Taking the lawyer advice.
But she didn't, and we got through the process easily enough. There were a few sticking points, but concessions were made on both sides, and we got through it. And when we went to divorce court, we presented a united front to the judges who, look for, I think it was with the rabbinical judges, in Israel, there's like this dual system where you have to get a rabbinical divorce, a religious divorce, and also a secular legal divorce. So you do one then the other. I think it's the rabbis who look for a chink in the armor, right? If they're not convinced that you both really want to get divorced, then they're not going to grant the divorce, and they'll tell you to go and work it out. Which might be good in some situations. I don't know. In our situation, we talked it through. We're like, don't show any shadow of doubt. We have to both come in there and say, this is what we want. I heard about another couple who they everything was settled. They had their divorce contract all finalized, and they went into divorce court, and they asked her, do you want to get divorced? She says yes. And they ask him, do you want to get divorced? He's like, well, no, I don't want to get divorced. And they're like, okay, so we're not granting it. Okay, but that's the way the system works. And they, he answered the question honestly, but not very intelligently, I guess.
Right. But just to be clear for our audience, not to get too into the legalities, my legal background, I can't help myself, but again, fortunately that worked out great, and it sounds like you were both very prudent about it.
Not always the case.
Pardon me?
Not always the case.
Not always the case. So, for example, I know in my case, I badly wanted to mediate, but the moment I was informed that my then wife, I guess you could say, had gotten a lawyer, I did get a lawyer. Even though I'm a lawyer myself, but I didn't know anything about family law.
Right.
And so I just want to make it clear for the audience, I think you would agree that, and we're not giving legal advice in any way, shape, or form, but you would agree that there is, yes, definitely when things can be worked out amicably, it's kind of like the game theory you were talking about, then great, if things can be worked out amicably, you took a chance and it worked out. But sometimes also, if one sees that, his ex-wife or his soon-to-be ex-wife is lawyering up, it's also important for somebody to protect himself and, to get that counsel. Unfortunately, that's just the reality, I think, right?
And in a lot of situations.
In a lot of situations,
Certainly wouldn't advocate that nobody ever lawyer up. Sometimes lawyers are called for. I'm thankful that I took that leap of faith and that it didn't backfire. But it was a leap of faith, and it could have backfired, and it probably would for other people. But a decision that I made early on in the process, I realized that I fought for my wife, but I wasn't going to fight against her when all was said and done. We tried to work it out, couldn't bridge the gap. I fought tooth and nail to keep my family together. I realized in retrospect that I was more interested, my motivation was to keep my family together, not necessarily my marriage. So, without one you can't have the other, and so that approach didn't work out. But when all was said and done, her mind was made up. She heard me out. We tried. We tried at the best of both of our abilities, maybe not. But that fighting spirit I didn't then translate to putting against her.
Right. Which is incredible. I mean, you say it very simply, but I just want to make it clear for our audience that, and I'm sure a lot of men listening or watching know this, that is incredibly hard. You have to really surrender your emotions in that sense, because like Ben was saying before, you're still feeling it. You're still feeling the emotions, but you have to make like a Herculean effort to really let go of that. So that's incredible. It's really amazing. I hope our audience really understands that. That's really kudos to you.
Thanks. It's it's challenging. It's been difficult at times, but I'm glad that approach has has worked until now, and I hope that it continues working. When we first got divorced, I realized that I had to make a change, and I didn't want to be angry anymore. I think I touched on this before. I didn't want to be angry anymore, and the first person that I wanted to be angry at, that I felt I would be angry at, was my ex-wife. That's what's right in front of me and causing all my emotional distress and upheaval in my life. This is the biggest challenge, and this is the one that I'm going to have to tackle first.
Are you worried? You mentioned, kind of going back a bit, but I'm curious. You mentioned going to the park today. I don't know if it was today, but with your ex-wife. Are you concerned that it could be confusion for your children?
Yeah, there is an element of that. Don't like to dangle this picture of, united family happiness in front of them. It's hard to counterbalance that with, I think it's good for them to see us getting along. Does it also have a certain element, a potential detrimental effect of giving them hope, or giving them a glimpse at something that they don't have? Maybe. It's hard to say. It was really bittersweet. One day, it was election day. It wasn't that long ago, just a few weeks ago, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, November 1st, I think it was.
November 1st.
And as of today, it's November 12th. We're recording. Yeah.
So yeah, just a couple of weeks ago, and it's like a day off. Everybody gets off from work and from school. Everything's closed down, so everybody can go out and vote. So I said to my ex, like, maybe we'll do something together. We can all go to the excuse me. We can all go to the voting station together, and then maybe we'll go out for lunch. She thought that was a great idea, and we did it, and we had a lovely time. And then my son wanted to come home with me, even though he was supposed to go to his mother's. It's no problem. It's just down the street, and he helped me do some stuff around the house that I wanted to do with that free time in the afternoon. And it was really bittersweet. I heard him sing this little song. Today was a great day. I saw my mom and dad back together again. Back together, just together, however he phrased it. And yeah, it's great that he had a great day. Sad that it all kind of hinged on this, what he deserves to be an everyday occurrence, seeing his mom and dad together.
Is it hard for you? Do you find that because you've been able to let go of emotions, ongoing basis, you're constantly working on yourself, but the fact that you've done it, let's say, in interactions with her, so when you go out with her, do you find that can be challenging? I know for myself, I feel that it's just, there was a period of time where my ex-wife and I, I would almost even say we were like friends, a very brief moment, but there was this moment in time. And I just realized it was not healthy for many reasons. And I'm just speaking for myself. And do you find, is that a concern of yours, or not at all type of thing? It's more just what we talked about with the kids, but for yourself, you're at a place where you're able to really distinguish the two.
Yeah, well, in my case, and I'm sure this isn't the case for a lot of people, I don't still want to be married to her. It's not like I'm pining for the few moments that we can share together. Our marriage had fallen apart. We weren't in love anymore. It was a matter of what we were going to do as a result. That was the disagreement. To try to fix it or to dissolve it and just move on. I don't find it so difficult she's pleasant to spend time with. And sometimes it requires on my part a little bit of reflection in how am I relating towards this person? Am I relating towards her as another human being that's in my life? Am I relating towards her as the closest thing that I have to, because I'm not remarried, I'm not dating anybody currently. There's nobody's taken her place in my life. So currently, so am I unloading everything that I have to share with a partner on this person who's the closest semblance of a partner that I have at that moment? I have to be asking myself that. Am I just rambling at her? sometimes I would find that she would come over here and, you know, I could tell from her body language that she was uncomfortable. So I asked her after, like, you know, well, what was going on for you there? And she told me that you know, there was like an anxious energy in the room. Okay, well, I'm glad you could share that with me. I don't take it personally because I know that I deal with anxiety sometimes. And I realized that by having her there, I was putting myself in my mind back into the old Noah that I used to be pre-divorce. Because the change in my mindset and my approach to life happened commensurate with the divorce, right?
Right.
So, you know, instead of being the person that I am now in the room with my ex-wife, I was now the person that I was then. And she could feel that anxious energy.
Wow.
So, you know, it's something I need to be aware of. I need to keep in check. And also to reassure her that, not for her own sake, but really for the sake of our co-parenting relationship, that what she was observing was not the energy in the apartment usually when the kids are here. The kids aren't in an anxious environment. They have, you know, there's always, you know, a bit of this and a bit of that, but I think they largely have a pretty happy home here.
Right.
And I know when other people come over to my house, into my home, they tell me that, you know, it's a nice calm environment.
Yeah. I've said that, I think, also. Yeah. Super
Yeah,
chilled.
totally.
Super chilled.
And I think the kids feel, you know, that like calm vibe in the apartment, which was very different from what my ex-wife was experiencing when she came over to visit.
Right.
I don't want her to think like the kids are always in emotional distress half of their time.
Right.
Like that would be terrible.
So on a brighter note,
On a brighter note,
we love to ask our guests to share their most too dad to quit moment, like a moment where you were proudest and you were like, all right, I'm dadding, I'm killing this.
yeah, it's it would be hard to pinpoint one, but I was thinking about this, and one, I don't know if it's the definitive too dad to quit moment, but certainly one that comes to mind was a weekend like this when the kids were at their mother's place, and it was right before sundown when the Sabbath would be starting, and you know I'd have been turning off my phone and everything, like been incommunicado, but like, you know, half an hour to spare, my ex-wife calls me and she says, and she's in a panic. She says our daughter has gotten her head stuck in the banister.
Oh my gosh.
Oh boy, that happened to my older brother also.
Happens to a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And you know, she seemed emotionally distressed about it, my ex-wife,
Yeah.
and she like couldn't figure out
What else?
calmly what to do, and she's like, can you come and help? And thankfully we live very close by. She was a little bit further then, but like, you know, still, like I hopped on my bike and got there. She was like shocked at how fast I got there. I dropped what I was doing to come and rescue my daughter. And for me, it was like very like logistical. Like
Right.
I need to get over there. I need to help resolve this situation and free my daughter's poor stuck noggin. But it was like outside in front of the house where they were living. And, you know, so my daughter could see me coming up the walkway. She saw me ride in on my bike, and she could probably hear the relief in her mother's voice when she saw me there, and she's standing there crying her eyes out. She was like a little girl, and she's stuck. And I calmly looked at the angles and just kind of,
Right.
you know, popped her. I'm like, she got her head in there.
Right. It's got to come
It's
out.
not so
Yeah.
stuck that it's now getting swollen. Like that can happen. You put your finger into a soda can or something and it swells up and now you can't get it out. Which happened to my brother. It was hilarious. He was a grown man. My daughter's
He was,
stuck.
yeah.
So he's not anymore. So, you know, I looked at it as calmly as I could and, you know, figured out, you know, which way she had gotten her head in and got it back out, and it pressed a little bit, but like didn't really hurt her. And everybody was so relieved, and my daughter looked at me, who's like, she's very attached to her mother. Obviously, like a lot of parents are, kids are towards their mothers. There's nothing like mom, just something that I, you know, repeat to myself in other instances. And there was this primal, you could see this primal connection between me and her, me and my daughter, that I had just come and rescued her.
Saved your
And
life.
yeah, that's what it seemed like to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she reached out to me, like I had to like come around,
Yeah.
and she reached out to me and leapt into my arms and said like, bye, Ema. I'm going with this guy. And my hero who's just come and saved me.
The cape attached to your back and it's
Seriously.
waving in the wind.
Wow.
And it was like, it was a big point of, moment of pride that I was able to help her, that I could get there that quickly, that she thought to call me to come and help. And then my daughter and I now had this like bonding experience where she hadn't, gone through the distress in the first place. But, I felt very, very proud of that. And it was really touching how my daughter was then like, goodbye, Ema, I'm going with Dad, with Abba. So yeah, that was definitely a point that jumps out.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's awesome.
So the last thing we like to keep leave our guests with is some advice for people dads going through divorce, because it can be, as you know, an emotional time, a stressful time, a hopeless time. Depending on how it is. What advice can you give anyone going through it, and something that maybe got you through it, something that you kept saying over and over in your mind?
Yeah. It's not the end of the world. You'll come out the other end. Your life might be falling apart, but it isn't over. You can rebuild. And just, check yourself. Figure out what you need to do to get through it. And, if there are changes that you think you need to make in your life, you need to figure that out. And look inwards, because you're not getting it from outwards anymore. You don't have that partner who's going to help you through things, who's going to help you figure out what's going on and how to deal with it. You're on your own. You're going to have to figure it out for yourself, and it might be time to make a change in your life. And if it is, figure out what that is and go after it with the same vigor that you might have in trying to keep your marriage together.
Well, thank you.
Amazing.
So, thank you for coming onto our podcast. It was amazing. Your stories were amazing.
I'm glad we got to do this.
I think this is going to help a lot of people.
I hope so. I hope it doesn't have to help anybody.
That's right.
But,
Well, it could help.
Touche.
It could help someone not go through it.
That's right.
yeah.
There's, I actually was looking at our stats, and there's between 25 and 32% of listeners are actually female. So maybe it'll give some insight into what a man might be going through or could go through,
Yep.
and maybe we'll save some marriages. Who knows?
Yeah, let's rewind, and I'm going to replace my bit of advice. Don't get divorced.
Noah, thanks a ton for doing this, man. You're the
Thanks for
best.
having me
That
on,
was
guys.
awesome.
Yep. Before you get up, I need to
Yep.
plug the podcast. So, everyone, thank you for listening. This has been the Too Dad to Quit podcast. toodadtoquit.com. We're available on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We want to hear your story. We want to share your story. Again, everyone has something to share that can help someone that's going through it, and we really want to hear from you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, review. Those reviews really do help our ratings, and I think we're onto something really big here. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. Available at toodadtoquit.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.